as we wrap up Financial Awareness Month, I want to remind you that the Marriage Money Mission program is just about to start, but it's not too late to join. So go to KeneCorder.com/program to get started. You'll get 12 weeks of activities that will lead up to you and your partner creating your marriage money mission statement. You'll also get 3 group coaching sessions and 1 one-on-one session with me. You'll get the bonus, which is a 5-day love and money challenge that includes 5 extra group coaching sessions and Q&As. Not to mention, when you're a member of the Marriage Money Mission Program, you also get the Prosperity Club, your annual insight, information, and accountability program. So you get all of that. It's just a small price to pay for a huge investment. So go check out KeneCorder.com/program to get started. I'll see you there.
You're listening to the Prosperity Report Love and Money Podcast. Find out what every couple needs to become a winning team in love and money. We bring you actionable ideas from expert therapists and experienced married couples, helping you stay happily married longer. Stay tuned until the end. We'll leave you with a tip you can start using today in our 5-minute activation segment. Now here's your host, best-selling author, speaker, and psychotherapist, Kene Corder.
Welcome to Prosperity Report, Love and Money Podcast. It's still Financial Literacy Month, or as I like to call it, Financial Wellness Month, but it's almost over. So before it ends, I wanted to bring you one more episode, this time dedicated to love, money, and children, especially students. Our guest today has a great solution for reining in the family finances while simultaneously teaching children responsible money habits. Bill Dwight is the CEO of FamZoo.com, an online family banking service that teaches kids good money habits. FamZoo won the Finovate 2013 Best in Show Award and the FinCon 2015 FinTech Startup Competition for its unique integration of a family finance app with prepaid cards. A 1984 graduate of Princeton, Bill has built software in diverse areas, ranging from artificial intelligence to personal finance. Bill and his wife have been married for 13 years, raised 5 children, and welcomed their first grandchild last year. Please join me in welcoming our guest today, Bill Dwight with FamZoo. Hey there, Bill.
Hi, Kene. I just want to mention that my wife and I have been married for 30 plus years, way more than 13.
Oh, did I say 13? Oh my gosh. Sorry. Let me say that again. It's really important.
I can't do the math, but we got married in 1984. So same year we graduated.
Oh, wow.
I just didn't want my wife to think that there was someone else.
Right. Either way is bad. Either you got it wrong in 13 years or you also have a wife that you can.
It is A, not B.
Okay. Let me not bring in any. This podcast is to help marriages stay happy, not to create any drama.
That's right. That's right. That's why I wanted to jump in there. So I think we're off to a good start. We got that correct.
Yes. Thank you very much. 33 years. That's 30 plus years. That's an awesome accomplishment.
Yeah. Let's see. It was 1984 and we're in 2018. So we're coming up on 34. How's that?
Nice. That's awesome. So I like to start with the question that really gets us talking about the money side sometimes, but also about life. So what is your idea of prosperity?
Well, that's a good question. I had to look that up to kind of see what the synonyms were. You know, I see things like ease, plenty, comfort, security, well-being. You know, to me, kind of growing up in Silicon Valley, prosperity was sort of a side effect of building something and being creative. You know, I grew up in the early days of Silicon Valley. My father was an entrepreneur. he founded a company that was the first company to commercialize lasers. So if you've been to the supermarket and had your stuff scanned, then you've interacted with Herb's, one of Herb's products, and Herb is my dad. So, my memories of growing up are all about going on the weekend into the lab and seeing lasers under construction. And my mom used to do the books, and, she'd take us in the car and we'd hang out in the car. In those days, you could just leave your kid in the car. For us, it was really never about the money so much as creating something new and being creative. And I think now's never a better time for lots of people to be able to be creative, create podcasts like you're doing. So the notion of prosperity in my mind is building something with your skills and being compensated for it, often downstream. But there's this intimate linkage with work in my mind to feel good and prosperous. And then once you are earning some money from that, getting a sense of calm by really putting the money in purpose-driven buckets. So that's a big theme for me, which is kind of partitioning money into money I need right at the moment to money I need for some future goals, and having a plan and then getting together with my spouse and family on that plan so we kind of know where we're headed. And I think that takes a lot of anxiety out of it. Even if we're behind on our plan, at least we have a plan. And I think having buckets that we're trying to fill up that are aligned with the plan really takes a lot of the stress or emotion out of it. That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I enjoyed listening to that. So creating or building something with your skills and then being compensated for that to the point where you can put together this plan, it sounds like, so that you can enjoy life and enjoy your family and provide for them and do all the things that, you guys enjoy doing.
Yeah, the reason I focus on skills is skills gives you confidence. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of people talk about this, it's a family show, I know, but FU money, like I'm going to get this pile of money over here. So no one can tell me what to do. Yeah. I kind of like to think of FU skills, which if I have a solid skill, in my case, I stumbled upon software development early on. Mm-hmm. It gives me a sense of confidence. It's because I don't have to work for employer A. I have this skill set. If I don't like the environment there or what we're building or where we're headed, I know I can go to employer B because I have this confidence in my skill set. Even if I'm not making a ton of money, I know I'm building a skill set and building value over time, and that gives me a sense of confidence to not be stuck in a bad situation. So that's why, kind of building skills is so central to the way I look at things.
That is awesome. Yeah, that's so true, because there are certain things that are just yours. And I have this statement, I call it drop dead. Like, so you're like drop dead good at something. Everybody's drop dead good at something, right?
Right.
So you know how they say drop dead gorgeous? I just apply it to skills. So
I've never had that applied to me, but being a balding old grandfather, but definitely, yes, if you're have a drop dead skill, in my case, over time, I became very proficient at writing software. That's very valuable. Yeah. And, it's not something that people can just take away from you. It's something that you build up, and it builds your confidence. And, it's kind of like that phrase, be so good that people can't ignore you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I like it. I was just talking to a financial advisor yesterday, and he was saying how his goal was to instill self-esteem in his children. And that for that very reason that you said, so that you can have the confidence to not feel trapped and know that you have options. Because when you do know your skill, when you do know your talents, like what you're good at, even if it's something that you learn to be good at, doesn't have to be that natural phenom thing that, the society makes us feel like we have to have. You could be something you worked hard at and you acquired, but it's yours and you got it now and nobody can take it away from you. And you can use it to do whatever it is you want to do, including create your idea of prosperity in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you make a good point there, which is you don't start out phenomenal. I think that's an important thing to communicate to your kids. Like in my case, I ended up going to this fancy pants school, Princeton, because I was a tennis player. And my first love was playing tennis, and I didn't have any idea what I wanted to do professionally. And so at the time, oddly enough, Princeton was top 10 in the nation in tennis. And so it was kind of on my list. And I ended up going there. And then by sophomore year, I'd hung up my rackets and switched over to computer science. But my point was I was awful at computer science my first year. I barely passed. It was the first time I got a C in my life. And I was completely out of my depth. There were kids there who had built computers, and I hadn't seen one. So I remember distinctly the first assignment was they gave you a program that was one sheet of paper written on a piece of paper, and it said, type this into an editor and run it. And I said, what's an editor? So, is that someone who's going to write it for me? Where is that kid? So I was completely out of my element, but it was such a great learning experience that over time, by sophomore year, I was a little more confident. Junior year, very confident. And senior year, they'd created a monster. That's an important thing for kids to realize, that they're going to have the ability to kind of come from behind if they're really interested in something. And no matter what it is, I just happen to be in software, but I'm sure it's true for really any skill. That's why I love the notion of an apprenticeship, where someone has the ability to learn from a master.
Yep.
About something they're very passionate about. You hear about this in, say, cooking all the time, where people train with a great chef. Yep. And it's kind of sad in my mind that we don't have a better system for that in this country for all kinds of different skills.
Yeah, but, that's so true.
Kids need to realize you got to start somewhere.
Exactly.
Everyone is crummy at some point at whatever they're passionate about, and then you.
Yeah. I have such a great example of that, but there are two things that I heard you say. So I want to touch on two things. One, I'm going to tell you this example. Did you know that Martin Luther King got a C in speech?
That is hard to believe.
It is. But I went to the Civil Rights Museum here in Atlanta, Georgia, and there is a copy of his report card in one of the exhibits, and I just happened to be with a group of peers. I didn't even point it out. I wasn't the first one to see it. One of my peers saw it and said, "Oh my goodness, he got a C in speech." We just laughed.
That's funny. I'm imagining the comment from the teacher is like, "What's this dream thing? Who's gonna, dream? Come on, you're too theatrical. No one's gonna listen to that." Yeah, wrong.
So wrong, right?
Well, that's a great story. That's inspiring.
Mm-hmm. So it's true. You can start out and not be good at something, or you don't necessarily get recognition for it. So maybe he was good, maybe he wasn't. Who knows?
Or you can pivot. So the good example would be, the only reason I got into computer science was because back in those days, computer science wasn't even a separate department yet. And it was in the electrical engineering department at Princeton. It was called EECS. So we called ourselves EECS Geeks. And the only reason that I went into electrical engineering was my dad was an electrical engineer. So I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I guess I'll be an electrical engineer. So then I realized that when I got there, man, electrical engineering courses are super, super hard. And computer science, well, it's just ones and zeros. How hard could that be? So I shifted all of my workload over to the computer science after getting that first C and being very competitive about it, being irritated. But I originally started out EE, realized that was not where my interest was at all, and just sort of slid sideways into CS. Yeah. So you kind of never know. You might start out and be really bad at something for a reason, but then you might stumble backwards into something that's tangential or related that you develop a deep skill in. So just kind of keep your eyes open. And pivoting is such a typical Silicon Valley word here with all these startups, but I think it applies to people.
It does. And the second thing that I was going to say, you touched on, but I want to expand on it, that you actually took something that you were good at to get you to something that became your passion and now your life's work. So you were great at tennis and it got you a scholarship, got you in college, you used that you got on the team, and then you're like, okay, and I'm done with that and on to the next thing.
Yeah, the funny thing is that a very fortunate and successful part of my career was working for Oracle Corporation, which is a very large software company. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is that those two skills came together, because it turns out that the co-founder of Oracle, a man named Bob Miner, most people know Larry Ellison, who's very famous. Unfortunately, Bob passed away, but Bob was a huge tennis enthusiast.
Oh, wow.
So we were able to talk about computer science and then tennis, and then we ended up playing some little local pro-am tournaments together. So you never know when those skills are going to come in handy.
That's so true. And I'm glad you said that. My boyfriend is a tennis coach,
Oh,
and I will definitely pass that on to him. Like, you never know who you're going to meet, who
that's
you're going
right.
to play tennis with. Yeah. And living in Atlanta, he does meet some really interesting people coaching tennis. He loves it, and he's really good at it. And he works with children, and it's so rewarding to see them, and hear the stories that he tells me about how they learned and progressed, and the confidence that it gives them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One of my favorite charitable donations every year is to East Palo Alto Tennis and Tutoring, which is a program, if you're may not be familiar with the Bay Area, but East Palo Alto neighborhood is very different from Palo Alto on the other side of
Oh, okay.
101. And East Palo Alto, has a lot of underprivileged kids, and this program brings the kids to Stanford to play tennis and combines that with tutoring from Stanford students. So it's wonderful because they get to
Wow.
see and surround themselves with really motivated students and get a peek into, what the world of a college campus is like. You
Yeah.
think, oh, well, they must have seen that. They're just across the highway. Well, no, they
Mhm.
don't, and they
Mhm.
don't get the experience to really interact with students normally. And so
Yeah.
this program is really fabulous because it takes two things that I'm a huge believer in, which is fitness and education, and
Yeah.
combines them and opens up opportunity and engages the parents, most importantly, as well. So
Yeah.
sorry to go off on a tangent, but
No, but
that's
that's
a
so
passion
great.
of mine.
Yeah, and it expands. Sounds like it expands their horizon, expands their world, because the world can be
Yes.
really small when you live in a neighborhood that you can't get out of, because
Yes,
you
if you
just don't
can't
have the
even see
finances.
the opportunities, they
Yeah.
might as well not
Hmm.
be there. Uh,
Exactly.
and so
And
this is
so,
a real eye opener for all parties involved.
right. And they get introduced to something different. Tennis is maybe not be what they are known. They don't know in their neighborhood. Maybe there are no tennis courts there. So they get introduced to something different in that sense, but also get introduced to the college life, which is pretty awesome to think about. Because I tell children all the time, if you hated high school, you'll love college, because you get to like make your own schedule and eat what you want. And I mean, college is awesome. Like, the only reason I
Yeah,
went to high school was to get to college.
and particularly when you surround yourself with people who are really interested in achieving, it
Yeah.
really rubs off.
Yes, that is so
Like
true.
when I was crying about getting my C minus, it was a C minus actually. I said C before, so I inflated my grade in computer science. It was still super, it made me mad, but it was still super motivating because I saw these kids that were just outstanding, and I was like, wow,
Mm.
how can they be so smart? Can I get this? It can be intimidating, but it's very motivated when you start seeing yourself start to level the playing field and catch up and so forth. So,
Yeah, that
you know,
is true.
some college experiences kind of, teeter in the other direction of kids partying and all that stuff. And yeah, it can be a bit of a
Yep,
mixed bag,
that's so
quite
true.
frankly. I'm on my 15, so I've seen it. But when kids
Oh,
get aligned with people who are purpose driven, it's really powerful.
awesome. That is so true. That is really true. In fact, sometimes to the point where they don't see any other options but to achieve, or but to do well, or be a good kid,
Hmm.
because their surroundings. That's so true. So, I mean, you do that as parents. You want to give them that surrounding. Now, of course, the world is full of opportunities for them to go outside of that. But when you give them that foundation, then they have a great way to stay in line with that. And speaking of foundation, I'd like you to tell me or tell us about FamZoo. I really want to hear more about FamZoo.
Yeah, so as you mentioned in the opener, I've been in software for a long, long time. About, 11 years ago, I founded FamZoo, and it came out of something that I had built for my kids because our older kids were in about middle school. So our oldest is 27 now. I think I'm doing the math right. Hard to remember sometimes. And when Haley and Taylor, our two oldest, were in middle school, we realized, man, we need to teach these kids something about personal finance. And they're not learning it in school, and they're
Mhm.
not learning it in the rarefied neighborhoods of Palo Alto. And they need to learn that money is a finite resource that needs to be managed thoughtfully and pick up. It's a skill it's a skill to manage money. So we don't expect kids to just sort of magically figure out how to play the piano or any other skills without some practice.
Right.
And so we wanted to
Great point.
give them some practice. And I looked around and just really didn't feel that there were any hands-on products that were built for teaching kids about personal finance. It was too much of a hassle to open up a checking account for the kids, and it didn't really have the teaching capabilities that I was looking for, because I wanted them to know, hey, if I take money out of my spending bucket and put it in the saving bucket, compound interest is going to work as magic. Well, if compound interest at a traditional bank is near 0%,
Right.
then a kid is not going to be too motivated by a penny or two after a year.
Right.
Parents aren't motivated by that. So what if the parent could set the interest rate and pay the kid an awesome interest rate,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of just get the kid in the habit of thinking about, hey, I can put my money in one of two places. I could put it in the spending bucket where I'll probably drain it and get nothing, not put it to work, or I could shift some over to the saving bucket and then get a text message from dad every week that says, you earned 5 cents, you earned 10 cents, and get that steady drumbeat in their ear saying, put your money to work. Now, so I ended up building something on a spreadsheet initially that was just sort of an accounting system. It was the bank of dad. And when you've got 5 kids, you don't want a lot of cash floating around because the kids will be, stealing it out of each other's sock drawers. So instead, we created the bank of dad. And if they got some cash for a birthday or whatnot, they'd bring it to the bank of dad. I'd put it in my wallet and I'd credit the spreadsheet. So it was just kind of this master spreadsheet that was the bank. And, they were learning, hey, what's a balance? What's a bank balance? What's a bank account? Even though it was this very simple thing. And then ultimately I got a little tired of the 5 kids wandering in asking, how much money do I have? How much money can I spend? How much money have I earned? So I built a little simple website for them to log in and find out for themselves. So it was kind of online banking. And one thing led to another, and ultimately I decided to turn it into a product. And so for the first several years of the company, it was just sort of this online accounting system where if my son Taylor wanted to buy something, I'd say, okay, well, what's your current balance? Oh, it's $10.90. You want to buy this $5 thing? Okay, here's $5. Then I'll deduct $5 from your account and, go spend it. Or I'd buy it for him and I'd deduct it from the account. So I was manually, keeping track. I would make the payment on his behalf. Now, one of those awards that we won that you mentioned in the outset, after we won it with that sort of what we call IOU accounts based product, a prepaid card company approached us and said, hey, what if we put your software together with our prepaid card so that the kid, instead of having to make the purchase on behalf of the kid could just make the purchase, right?
Wow.
So no more manual accounting, and furthermore, way more motivating for a kid, because what kid doesn't want their own card with their name on it? And so they feel empowered, and of course kids crave responsibility and autonomy. The beautiful thing is that I wasn't actually familiar with prepaid card products back in that time. The prepaid card product is perfect for kids because they can't spend more than what's on the card.
Yeah.
So they can't, go into debt. They can't screw up their credit record. In fact, this doesn't have any impact whatsoever. So it's neither good nor bad for your credit record.
Yeah.
So if you want to build your kid's credit record, you kind of might do a hybrid strategy that I often talk about, where you might take like a recurring fixed payment and put it on a credit card for them, so that's a very known thing, and pay it off, and then use a prepaid card for all of their discretionary spending. So that's one technique that several families use. But,
that's a really good technique.
But in any event, we ended up really focusing the product on this combination of this family finance application where parents can be the bankers, and then the way it was realized was through these prepaid cards. So the kids would have, a spending card. And not only that, they can have any number of cards. So just like you might have 3 jars for your young kid for spending, saving, and giving, and whenever they either do an odd job or get $20 from grandma or whatever, they say, okay, let's split this between spending and saving and giving. Well, we automate all that because you can have as many buckets as you want, as many little cards as you want. And so you might have a card that's a charitable giving card. And when a chore or allowance payment is made, you can, as the parent, say, well, let's have 80% go to spending, 10% to giving, 10% to saving, or let's do 60, 20, 20. Actually, this is a great conversation to have with your kids.
Yeah.
Like, ask them. Don't tell them the percentage. Ask them. Have a conversation about what saving is all about and charitable giving, and you'll be amazed at what they choose as the percentage. And when they take ownership is everything. Like when they take ownership of a decision like that, it's really powerful because they're not being told to do something.
That is so true. And they pick up and they get this stuff really quickly. And then they start holding you accountable.
Well, you've just touched on one of the fascinating ulterior motives or side effects of the product, which is if you are setting up a system for your kids where you're encouraging them to take their every payment and split it between spending, saving, and giving, and you're encouraging them to think about shifting money from their spending to their savings to get a return, you start cleaning up your own habits. You start thinking, am I doing that with my accounts?
Yep.
And really the family picks up habits together. And I think that's kind of the magic of it, because a lot of parents are very intimidated about money and end up not talking to their kids about it because perhaps they feel bad about their own situation or how they're handling money. And that's a real shame because starting early is so critical.
Yep.
You don't have to be perfect, right? You just have to be willing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just get in there, no matter how messy your situation is, and get in there and start communicating some very basic concepts to your kids, like purpose-driven buckets like this, and set it going and start simple. And, before long, you'll be having great conversations with your kids. I knew I kind of had it right by the time our fifth kid rolled around, the caboose, who's now 16, but he had the benefit of growing up sort of the entire time on the system. And one day he came into my office and said, "Dad, you mean there's some people that don't split money between spending, saving, and giving?"
Oh my God. That is
I was like, bingo, that's exactly what it was. So if you can mold their little minds, from the get-go, then it just seems natural to them, right?
Yep, that is so cool. I teach a course called the Marriage Money Mission or the Family Money Mission. And this is a great extension of it because the mission is, or this is a mission statement that you put together of how you're going to earn, grow, protect, gift, and enjoy your money. And then FamZoo could be the way that they execute on the plan, because sometimes there is a disconnect, which is why a financial therapist exists, because the plan gets, sometimes they make the plan. They're able to make the plan. It's just the execution that they find really confusing and tough, and they never really move on it. So having a system like FamZoo could help them really execute on their plan. Yeah,
our goal is really to somehow leverage technology to lower the barrier to good money habits, and also to provide a platform where people can express their own values. I'm not here to tell you whether you think paying your kids for chores is a good idea, or whether a fixed allowance is a good idea, or whether you should reward them with interest, or any of those things. I'm here to give you a menu of knobs and dials that you can tune for your own family bank to express your own values to your kids, and simplify that and lower the bar to that, so that you have that, whatever that conversation is, you have it. Because, as the personal finance columnist for the New York Times, Ron Lieber, says, conversations about money are conversations about values, ultimately.
Yes, that is so true.
So if people think about it that way, hey, I'm not having a money-grubbing conversation. I'm having a conversation about values. What do we value in our life, and where we spend our dollars should be reflective of the values that we have, and how we pass money to our kids should reflect what we value. There's so many hot buttons in this discussion. So just take the word allowance. I mean, there is some great comedy around this. Chris Rock, everybody Hates Chris or whatever that show was. They have a great sequence on allowance where the kid comes in and is like asking if he can get this leather jacket, and Chris Rock's dad looks at him and said, "An allowance? An allowance is where I allow you to stay in my house." And then he goes on to lecture him for like 20 minutes. Like, never mind, Dad. But my point is, allowance is a real hot button word. Why? Because when I say allowance, most people think handout.
Yep.
Now, what if the word was budget? So what if I wasn't giving my daughter an allowance, I was giving her a clothing budget? She's got to wear clothes.
Yeah.
In fact, most parents just buy clothes for their kids in some ad hoc way. What if, instead of me making the decisions about how much money I give her, having a negotiation around every time a purchase happens, what if I say, go make a budget, count up, all the jeans you think that you need to buy during the year and everything else, and then come back to me with a proposal, and then I'll do what I learned in all corporations. I'll cut that proposal in half. And, we'll have a negotiation about a budget. I'll give you the money, and you make all the decisions. This is a great thing to do around high school. It's, with younger kids, that's a little too aggressive. But in high school, it's perfect. So what did my daughter do as a junior in high school? She decided that she absolutely had to have this Neiman Marcus chiffon gown for the prom. She came to me and said, I'm going to spend my clothing budget on this. And I said, I don't think that's a great idea, but it's your money. So she summarily dismissed my advice, and she blew her entire budget on that. And then she went the entire rest of the year with nothing. That was a very powerful lesson for her. She wasn't mad at me. She made the decision, and she learned the hard way. So if you turn an allowance into a budget and you engage your kid in setting the amount of that budget, it's an incredible learning experience. They're not mad at you. They might be mad at the budget they struck. You can tune the budget over time if it doesn't make sense. Like if they forgot, like, oh, I actually have to buy underwear, things like that.
Right.
You might point that out.
Yeah, they can forget something like that.
But the point is, it kind of takes all the friction out of it, right?
Yeah.
And that's true, and not only with kids, but with spouses and so forth, and just kind of wrapping a budget around things and giving people ownership over that is a very powerful tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if you have children that have to learn their own lessons, like, every child is different. And
I've never met a child that didn't have to learn their own lessons.
No, I'm telling you.
Maybe that's just my bad parenting.
No, like for me, I can learn from other people. I'm a middle child, and I would learn from what my brother and sister did. I'm like, ooh, okay, that got you in trouble. Won't be doing that. Right. But my daughter, I have an adopted daughter, and we joke all the time about, like, she really has to make her mistakes. But what's so wonderful about her is she'll come back and say, oh, you told me, Mom, like I should have just did what you told me. You always know what's best, but for some reason I just always got to do my own thing.
Yeah. And the whole goal is to kind of provide a safe sandbox, financial sandbox for kids to make those mistakes and not have horrible repercussions.
Yes,
so they're not running around with a credit card, jacking up a big debt or destroying their credit rating. Instead, they're running around with a prepaid card that if they try to overspend, guess what? It says decline. And they're embarrassed in front of their friends, and there's no harm, no foul beyond the embarrassment.
Right.
And,
so they learn it at home before they go out into the real world.
That's right. And that's true of debit cards too. I will tell you that banks are very slippery about overdraft fees. And it can be very difficult to avoid them because all of the language around overdraft is overdraft protection. Well, it's not protection. I mean, yes, they're letting the transaction going through, but then they're dinging you $30.
Yep.
I mean, it's nuts. And so I don't think that parents need that sort of headache. They got enough headaches in their life.
Yeah, exactly.
And they don't want to be handing money over to the bank. So we just charge a flat fee, monthly fee. It's in the worst case, it's $5.99 for the entire family, no matter how many cards you have.
Oh, wow.
And if you pay in advance, you get a better deal. You can get 2 years for $60. And that's the fee. Like, kids can decline like crazy. Sometimes we encourage parents to assess a fee to their kids. So, for example, if you think that your kid is being too cavalier about declines, You can kind of say, look, you're never going to graduate to a real bank account until you can go 6 months without a decline. And furthermore, if you get a decline, I'm going to deduct $1 from your account. It's not going to a bank somewhere. It's going to the bank of mom and dad.
Right.
But they're learning, hey, it's painful to overdraft, basically. But the good news is it's not going to some,
right.
bank or third party. It's staying in the family, and the kids are learning the lesson. So that's really what our philosophy is all about.
Oh, that's pretty cool. What it sounds like, you have this system and you put it in place whenever you get started, hopefully younger, but whenever you get started with the system, but they can take it into their lives. And then this could become sort of like a generational thing. And then, then I'm sure your child is going to be teaching your grandchild this system, right?
One of the things I love about doing this with your family is that it really promotes a sense of transparency. One of the best features, I think, is the activity alerts, because the cards, you can set up activity alerts so that both the parent and the child get a notification. Now, some people might think, oh, well, that's very big brotherish, right? Like, I don't want to be always looking over things. But as long as when you first set it up with your child, you're basically, okay, I'm going to give you some money. That's the good news. It's like, woohoo, yeah, money. I like it.
Yeah.
But note that I can, in the system, I can see all the transactions, and both of us are going to get a real-time alert whenever you use the card. So I just want you to know that up front.
Yeah.
And as long as you set that expectation up front, the beautiful thing is that the activity alerts create an awareness around spending. So, one of the things that we worry about kids running around with the cards is that, swipe it here, swipe it there, never know what your balance is until you decline or something. Our text alerts tell you how much money is left on the card. So it's a very simple reminder. You just spent $10. You've got $33.55 on the card left.
Yeah. Oh,
we're
nice.
always reminding you what the balance is. And so some kids really only interact with the system through text messages. They don't have to log in. They know what's on their card. So there's a mindfulness that happens. When you pay with cash, you feel it. You see it, right? So we're trying to put some of that feeling back in by, okay, every time you swipe your card, you can get hit with a text message right away. It's just like reminding you, you just spent money and this is how much you have left. So we try to create an electronic equivalent of the pain of cash.
Right.
We know that people spend less with cash, but we also know we're in a very electronic world. How do you pay for iTunes with cash? You don't.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we've just got to deal with that reality, but we can create tools to kind of put some of that pain and awareness back in. So there's a benefit there, but then there's also this getting comfortable with financial transparency.
Yeah.
Kids grow up feeling comfortable talking about what they're spending money on, then they'll probably have that same comfort with their partner or their spouse or their boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever.
Yeah.
That you get this, once you kind of develop this comfort, and this hanging out in the FinCon community, where we meet and go to this conference, and we meet fellow people who have become very comfortable with financial transparency. And it's very empowering, because they're comfortable talking about the good and the bad of their financial condition. And that's very liberating and very helpful when you're seeking help from others. So,
yeah, that is. And it's a good point that you bring up, because I'm so comfortable talking about money because this is what I do for a living.
Right. Everyone else thinks we're freaks.
Right. Exactly. So I do often forget how tough that conversation can be until I'm face to face with a client, or, because I work with couples one-on-one. So when I'm face to face with them and the conversation is so difficult, and I'm thinking, how did you guys go this long? Like, how is it possible that you didn't have? When I first met my boyfriend, when we first decided to become exclusive, one of the things I told him, my business fluctuates. Like, sometimes I have a lot of money and sometimes the cupboard is bare. So, and we decided that if we go on 4 dates, he pays for 3, I pay for 1, sort of. We didn't it wasn't spoken, but that was kind of what was happening. So I wanted him to know that sometimes on my date, it's not going to be fancy.
Right. Yeah.
So I felt like I needed to tell him that ahead of time, but I was comfortable saying that because I talk about money all the time. But when I meet with couples, sometimes they almost feel like they were bamboozled,
Right.
Yeah.
And the root of tension so often is misset expectations between two parties. So
Yep.
one party's thinking, oh, well, Kane is going to be picking up the awesome vittles every night. And you're thinking, this is a tough month. I can't afford that. And there's a misset expectation.
Yep.
And that leads to, all kinds of bad things. Now, the nice thing about transparency is that, people's expectations are kind of laid bare and set, and it just reduces friction so much when people are on the same page about expectations. And
it does.
And I think it's like any habit. Things become a habit. Not talking about money becomes a habit. Talking about money becomes a habit. So it's a matter of just kind of, flipping the script on that. And of course, you can overshare. I mean, I'm no millennial. I'm way past that. And there's definitely things that you go like, okay, we don't have to share everything. But when it's your partner, then, sharing is really appropriate.
Yeah.
So I don't need to blast out to the world all my financial details.
Right.
But to my close-knit family and at age-appropriate moments with my kids, but definitely with my spouse.
Yeah.
I want to do that.
I was recently listening to another podcast, and the guest on the show was saying how in college she used credit cards like most of her college lifetime, and never really told her parents. So by the time she graduated, she had like this intense anxiety of this debt that she had accumulated, not just the student loan debt, but the credit card debt that went along with that, and this secret that she was keeping. And so she finally had to, burst out and tell them in tears, is the way that she described it, and that I just feel like I just ruined my life, basically.
That is incredibly common.
Yeah.
It's common because kids go off to college and they want to be able to prove to their parents that they're independent. And if they get sideways with the credit card, A, they feel that they failed in their independence, B, they're in trouble, and, they put off talking about it because that embarrassment. They want, they want to be autonomous.
Yeah.
And it's really crushingly painful for them to come back to their parents and admit that there's an issue here and work with them. And it's so tragic because the earlier you have that tough conversation, the quicker you're going to be out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I think that college kids need to realize how common that is so they don't feel super guilty about it, and they just move on to fixing the problem and nipping it at the bud as opposed to letting it go for a long time. And then parents need to be accommodating of, it doesn't mean that parents bail them out. Parents sit down with them and make a plan. So we're back to having like a plan, because plans reduce anxiety.
That's so true. In episode 2, we talked about, the guest and I, we were talking about how people, they avoid having that conversation, especially when it's about money. They avoid and they avoid and they avoid, and they think, if I avoid this conversation, it'll be better, right? But really, and that's a habit, because you just talked about talking about money as a habit, and not talking about money as a habit, but also avoiding people when there's a money conversation that needs to be had, that also becomes a habit. And if using FamZoo can show that transparency and get used to transparency early on, then when you're in college and you're out there a little bit more yourself and you make some mistakes, you're okay with saying, hey, I made a mistake. Can you help me put together a plan to get out of this situation?
Right. And also the using a system or a tool is very helpful. So some people are like, well, I just have to have more willpower. No, maybe not. Maybe you're just using the wrong tool. Like maybe using a credit card is very difficult for you. In my case, one of my children had pretty severe dyslexia and ADHD, and just the concept of a credit card where you pay now and then you get hit with this bill later, it's like, what's that all about? Like, it's just, that's a bad tool for that child's situation or that person's situation. So instead, maybe a prepaid card for discretionary expenses is the perfect tool for you, because what happens, you swipe the card, you get told exactly how much you have left. And then in real time, you're sort of saying, well, I can't get pizza tomorrow because I've only got $20 left, so I'll delay that. That's such a different experience than I have this credit card and I have no idea how much I owe.
Right. Yep.
What the heck? I'll get the pizza.
Exactly.
The prepaid card or a debit card where you've carefully eliminated overdraft fees, which is takes a lot of work actually, that's a better tool. So use the tool that works for you, right?
Yeah.
I think that's important for people to understand as well, because they can't just beat themselves up about willpower.
Yep.
Maybe you're just using the wrong tool. Why should you
Yeah.
have to have a ton of willpower? If you use the right tool, you can just forget about it.
Exactly. Yep. Now, you've given us some really good examples, but I want to kind of get a little bit more specific to college, because as we've talked about, college can sometimes bring financial trouble for students. So what do you hope, or what have you seen work? Because you've put some children through college, and I'm sure you've used this system in some way. So what have you seen worked, and how can college students use FamZoo to help them become more financially responsible?
Yeah, college is often the place where they really start to see what life costs.
Yeah.
Because when you're in high school, even very independent kids, the parents are often taking care of the household purchases or things like that. In college, you go off and, it's like, oh, I need deodorant. Mm-hmm. Wow, that stuff's expensive.
Yeah, or stereo, that's expensive. But
so just
the box
random
is so
stuff.
tiny.
And so what I like to do is we have this feature that we developed basically based on our own experiences with kids in college, which is called the reimbursement request. And so what I like to do is have kids pay for as much stuff as possible, even if I'm going to pay them back. Mm-hmm. Because two reasons. One is they have to have enough on their card to make the purchase in the first place. Mm-hmm. And then they know that, that's kind of my rule. It's like, you got to keep enough money to make the purchase in the first place. I'm going to pay you back, but you got to have enough money on it. So that creates a good habit, which is carrying a balance, right? Mm-hmm. The other is they start to internalize what stuff costs. So if they have to kind of go through this process where, okay, I need to get deodorant, I'm going to go buy it, and then I'm going to push this button to ask for reimbursement from dad. And during that process, I'm going to be reminded of how much it costs. If I think I've bought something fancy, I might ask to be compensated for a little less than what it costs. So like if goes out to Chipotle and has like 2 burritos, he knows I'm going to come back with, you could have done with 1, Mm-hmm. So it puts this intentionality and consciousness into spending. And they're getting, in college, they're getting exposed to paying for a lot more necessities. And so depending on how much a parent reimburses is completely family dependent.
Yeah.
The kid may be taking care of everything out of their savings that they built up from their summer job. Mm-hmm. It depends on the arrangement.
Yeah.
And my point is, college is a time where they're paying for a lot of discretionary expenses for the first time. And so to have conversations around that is extremely helpful, because otherwise you could end up in that situation where they somehow got a hold of a credit card. The Credit Card Act of 2000, whatever it is, 9 or whatever, really put the kibosh on handing credit cards out like candy to kids under 21, mm-hmm. Fortunately.
Yeah.
But some kids get them from their parents or can substantiate that they have enough income to get them and get themselves in trouble. But the point is just getting kids mindful about it, getting them comfortable having the conversations about the money. I think that's very valuable and important. And I don't find it invasive personally. That's just my personal feeling. I think you're better off getting comfortable. And, parents have to realize, wink, wink, nod, nod, there's going to be some purchases that, think back when you were in college.
Yeah.
So whenever I get a transaction that says Venmo on it, mm-hmm. I know that my son has paid his buddy back for beer. So I send a little text that says, beer. And that's it. Like, I enjoyed beer when I was in college. Come on.
Right. Yeah.
So, I think that as long as parents aren't using that transparency to nag their children, and they take the time to remember what it's like to be off on your own for the first time,
Thank you.
It can be a positive experience. Right?
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. That is important and powerful. So you gave us some great examples. What would you say was the biggest challenge, or maybe a challenge you see customers have when it comes to passing down these systems to your children, especially college students, especially if you're starting out late? Because see, you started out so early, so they
for half the kids.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So I've seen both sides of it.
Okay, so tell us about
talk to customers every day. And so the kinds of struggles I tend to see are, one, a parent kind of comes in heavy-handed with this really elaborate plan. Like, we're going to have these 50 chore charts, because you can use our system to set up like assigned work and monetary amounts.
Oh, okay.
So that when the item is checked off, the associated amount flows to the kid's card.
Okay.
So they get these like really elaborate plans, like this is your 50 chore thing for the day. And kids are like, yeah, whatever, Mom.
Never mind.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'll go get a job. Which might be a good thing.
Right.
But not only that, they create like a monster that's hard for them to manage.
Yeah.
And so my advice there is just start simple.
Yeah.
You can add complexity and stuff over time. Just start really simple. The other piece of advice is set expectations. Like I say with the activity alerts, like don't just like turn on activity alerts and then 6 months later say, you spent this on this, and this the last 6 months. I'm like, how did you know? Oh, I forgot to tell you, I turned on activity alerts. No, like start the conversation with, here's this card, but it comes with these activity alerts. I want you to know that up front. Mm-hmm. Right? So setting expectations will completely change the dynamic. If your kids think that you're skulking around behind their backs, they're not going to dig that. No kid likes that. No adult likes that.
No, nobody. It does not feel good.
Right. Yeah. So just kind of starting simple and being candid with your child about like what the system does, how it works. These are just little things, but they make a world of difference. So those would be things I see.
Great points. So my therapy office and my counseling office is in an affluent area in Georgia. And I see a lot of parents dealing with trying to teach their children money values just because money is not an issue. Like money is not a problem. Maybe when they were growing up, it was. And so they didn't want their children to have to deal with that. And so they've given them so much, but then the value of money is not really there because they're like, oh, money just comes. I don't have to really do anything for it. Right. Yeah. Right. But I can also see how this system can help teach some values in money, even when money is easy.
It does when money is easy and when money is tight. I think the interesting realization for me is I kind of thought that this product would skew towards upper income families, but it hasn't. We have an incredibly broad demographic. Why? Because all families deal with money and all families have issues around money. And it's just the quantities that are different in many cases. And there are hang-ups about money among wealthy families, and there are hang-ups about money in non-wealthy families.
Yeah.
And all of them need to learn to live within a constraint. That constraint might be at a different level for some, but people are going to be very unhappy if they don't learn about constraints.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm very proud of with our card is you don't have to have a checking account to use our cards. You can take cash down to a participating retailer and load it onto the Bank of Mom or Bank of Dad card. The way it works is that the family gets a collection of cards, or you can do a direct deposit from your job onto the card. Now you have to be aware of the limits on the card. Our cards don't carry a ton of money because they're geared towards kids.
Right.
But as long as you're like within the limits, you don't need a checking account. There are ways to load with cash. There are ways to load with direct deposit. And that's true of any of the cards. So when your kid gets that first part-time job, boom, they can do the direct deposit right onto the card. And so I'm very excited that we don't do things to prevent any family from using the product.
Yeah.
There are a lot of fintech companies that intentionally require you to have, for example, a checking account.
Okay.
Why? Because it reduces their support costs. And that's just not what we're all about. We're about teaching kids of all stripes, note the tiger.
Yes.
On the site. That comes from Princeton Tigers.
Legacy. Oh, I got it.
Any stripe. We just want to help parents teach kids about financial literacy. So that's
make it easy to do that and don't put any obstacles in their way. That's right. Pretty cool. So I have 2 more questions because I know you have a productive schedule, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but this has been such an informative conversation. It's so good. So I'm glad you decided to spend some time with us today, but I'll get to my next question. And I know you said you're not a marriage expert, but after 33 years, I was think that you know a little something. So I'm wondering if you could give our listeners, like a lot of our listeners have young marriages. So if you could give our listeners just a couple tips, because many of our listeners dream of having a long, happy marriage. And even though you may not be the expert, you've had a long marriage and you may know some tips or have learned maybe how to reduce the money argument. Let's go there. Let's make it let's make it simple.
The way I look at it is it's kind of like investing in the stock market.
Okay.
Some days you're going to get slammed. And then some days the market is way up.
Mm-hmm.
And if you stay in it for the long haul, it's upward trending.
Yeah.
I mean, you just got to step back and say, we're having this dispute now, but tomorrow's a new day, and maybe it'll linger a bit. But in the long haul, we've had through experience our ups and downs, but generally trending upward. Yeah. I think just the ability to slow down the emotion or take yourself out of the emotional moment and think long term. If you've got that mindset, I think you're going to probably be healthier in your relationships, and you'll also be a better investor.
Nice. And that's so good that you said that. And what I also just realized is that people are a lot more forgiving of their children than they can be of their spouses. Like they see their children through so many hardships and trials, and they let their children stress them out so much and then forgive and forget and forgive and forget. But then they hold their spouse and they like never forget. And they're like, you did this back in 19.
Right. Well, I think that there's a fundamental difference there, and that is that we made these children, and we tend to look at their accomplishments as a reflection of us.
Yes.
And so it's very painful for us to let go of that.
Yep.
So we can be a lot more forgiving of that in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And we can turn to our spouse and say, he did that because of you. That's your gene. So there's kind of not the out there.
Yep.
And so
that's a great point.
I think raising kids is stressful, but there is nothing more rewarding. And you just got to realize that also it's amazing now to be on our fifth teenager and have grown children. It's, I think that's part of why being a grandparent's so awesome, because you've seen the whole life cycle.
Yeah.
You kind of know what's coming, and you know what to kind of freak out about and what not to freak out about. And I don't know, there's just that perspective there.
Yeah.
And I don't know how young parents can get sort of an advanced glimmer of that perspective, but if they can, it's very helpful.
Good. So my last question, and listeners, I want you to stay tuned for our 5-minute activation after we get our last question answered. But I also want you to give us where people can find you and FamZoo.
Yeah. So first of all, the way to remember the name is short for My Family is a Zoo. So if you can remember that our families are all kind of like a zoo-like experience sometimes. FamZoo.com, FamZoo.com. And, we're on social media, Facebook, and so forth. And one of the great things is we just created our private Facebook group for FamZoo members. So if you order the cards for your kids and so forth, part of what comes with that is a membership in the group. And it's been really delightful because it's all like-minded parents who are focused on teaching their kids youth financial literacy, and they're sharing, here's what happened with my kid, and this worked, and this approach didn't quite work. And what's wonderful is you get such a wonderful cross-section of people trying different things, and somewhere in there you're going to find a parent and a kid in a situation similar to yours. Maybe not copy them, but extract some things that you can apply in your family. So we just started that group a couple of weeks ago, and it's already been just really wonderful. It's one of the few good reasons to be on Facebook.
Nice. So I'll wrap us up with, what is the best marriage advice you ever received, or the advice you wish someone would have told you?
Well, I can tell you the worst advice I ever got.
Okay.
So my wife and I met in college and got married the summer that we graduated. So
wow.
We, in my opinion, fortunately missed all those post-college dating years. bar hopping and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember some woman coming up and saying, "You're making a big mistake. You're too young to get married. And this is going to be disastrous." Like, wow, who invited this woman? Your experiences are your experiences, and your situation is unique, and everyone's going to kind of try to project their experience on your relationship, and take it for what it is. It's their experience. It may or may not apply, and thankfully, in our case, it didn't apply. And I think, there's nothing I feel luckier about than the decision that I made, or I should say, the decision Selena made to marry me. Let's be honest, who's in control. But it sounds weird to tie it to money, but one of the best financial decisions you can make is to pick a solid partner.
It really is. It truly is. I'm so glad you said that.
All of the hardship emotionally and financially that comes, especially if unfortunately the breakup comes after children, it's very painful. Sometimes it can't be avoided, so you've got to make that as amicable as possible. But it's an important decision, so take your time. But sometimes when you rush into it, just like we did, it could still work out. So you just, there's a lot of luck involved.
Yeah, it kind of is. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad we got a chance to talk about FamZoo and hear all the experience that you had with it from the beginning and all the way through. And I'm sure that our listeners got some really good tips on how they could use it in their families. So I appreciate you giving us that.
We'd love to serve your listeners' families. And if they have any questions, just reach out. There's a contact us link on the site. I'm on social media all the time when I'm not doing a podcast. And, Twitter and Facebook are the primary vehicles. But just ask if you have a question. Always happy to.
Great. I'm glad that you're there for them. And I will put that information in the episode notes. So if anybody didn't get it while they're listening, you can just go to the website and it'll be there for you.
All right. Excellent.
All right. It's time for 5-minute activation, a quick financial therapy session to get you activated and on your way to increasing the love and money in your marriage. So can I get 5 minutes of your time? Just 5 minutes for a financial therapy activation. Today, I'd like to talk about college funding. A lot of times when we think about college funding, we go straight to student loans. And then there's 529s, and those are the two that get talked about the most. But there's some other options, so let's get creative. There's this one way that I call a multi-layered approach. It starts with savings. So maybe you do have that 529 or UTMA or whatever kind of account you want to save in, but start with savings. But knowing that maybe your savings might not be enough, you plan to pay some out of pocket. Determine what that number is. Kind of guessing, of course, because you don't know what college your child is going to go to, but just put a number down and start working towards knowing that you're going to have to pay some out of pocket and getting your mind right around that idea. Now, out of that out of pocket, a portion of that might come from loans. Now, there are parent loans and then there are student loans, and it's my belief that the student should have some skin in the game. So I'm not a huge fan of parent loans. I prefer that the student, if they're going to take out loans, do that. Now, that's my own belief, and a lot of people don't agree with that because they don't want their child to have that burden, but it may be something to push them a little bit and help them to grow and get responsible. And one way you can take out loans is through your insurance policy, which I know a lot of people use term insurance rather than permanent insurance. But if you are using cash value life insurance, then taking a loan out of your insurance could be helpful in paying for college. Another way is to ask for gifts. So if people are going to buy your student gifts, then have them gift a certain amount to that savings plan that you started for them. And you can start this as early as possible. You can start this when they're 10 years old or even younger if you like, especially if you know you're already going to be able to get them toys and clothes and those kinds of things. They probably don't need any more toys and clothes. So getting their grandparents and aunts and uncles and just loved ones to contribute to that savings could be really helpful in paying for college. And then there's scholarships. So a lot of times we think of scholarships as just full scholarships, but they're partial scholarships too. And some of my friends went to school on scholarships, but they weren't academic scholarships. They were tennis scholarships, golf scholarships, bowling scholarships, band, choir, all kinds of scholarships out there, including partial scholarships that maybe there was one scholarship that I got because I was the only one who applied. Now, of course, I'm wonderful, so I would have won anyway, but really, I was the only one who applied. So that's why I got that scholarship. And you just never know. Stuff like that happens. And then there are book scholarships, but there are tons of ways out there to help you pay for college. And it does take some effort, but you just have to be creative. Now, here's another thing. This is really creative. And this is a tactic that my mom used when I was going to college. And that is having the student file independent. Now, the first year, that's very difficult and it usually can't happen. So you may have to pay in full for the first year. But around the second, third, and fourth, and whatever else other years, they could file independent. But if they do that, of course, that means you're not filing them on your taxes because they're filing their own taxes. Now, consult your accountant about all of this and any tax implications that come from this. But I know this is possible because my mom did it when I was going to college, and they could get a $8 or $10 an hour job and work 25 or 30 hours a week and then go to school the other time. And it does mean that the student is working pretty hard. And for some people, they don't want their student to have to work that hard, but it is an option. So know that. And here's another option, starting small and building up, meaning starting with like a junior college and then building up to a university, or just starting with a college that doesn't cost as much as maybe the university that you'd like to have your degree from. So start small and work your way up. And then there's the gap year. You can have your student take a gap year, and that way they can kind of figure out what they want to do. And that 2 years of junior college can help them also figure out what they really want their major to be. Now, here's something. I encourage you to start with a vision board for your students really early, as early as possible. Now, I encourage vision boards for individuals, for couples, and for children, because if you get your children seeing their dreams early and really visualizing them, then you'll put them in a habit of believing in those dreams, and even having them open that dream account, an account to go along with college. Instead of calling it a college account, call it their dream account, because you're helping them put their dreams in place. And college is one of those things. So that's our 5-minute activation. I hope that was helpful. And I want to remind you that it's still Financial Awareness Month. Do whatever you need to do to get your finances together as a couple so that you can increase the love and money in your relationship. And while you're at it, we're starting the Marriage Money Mission. It's not too late to join. Go to KeneCorder.com/program and join the Marriage Money Mission so you can increase the love and money in your relationship. I will see you soon. Hey guys, thanks for listening. If you want more love and money conversations, subscribe to this podcast. Also, tell your friends about us. I'll see you next episode. But in the meantime, head on over to presidentiallifestyle.com for more tips, tools, and resources. And go ahead and leave us a comment if you like. We'd love to hear from you. This show is not to replace professional counsel. The best advice comes from a professional you know. The topics discussed in this podcast are general in nature and are for entertainment and informational purposes only. We encourage you to meet with a professional to discuss your specific situation, whether financial or therapeutic. That's all for now. I'll see you sooner. Remember, no matter what anybody ever tells you, you can have wealth in all of its forms. Believe it, and you will soon see it.